This is a demo of microprofile REST Client 2.0 on Open Liberty. So first of all, some of the stuff we've already had in previous versions of microprofile implemented in Open Liberty, and that includes things like CDI managed providers, such as client request and response filters, etc. Basically, if those things are CDI beans, they're automatically used with injection, etc. on a client request. Another one is proxy server support. This is one that we've had for a while, but now in the spec it's more portable. And the way it works is you would specify a proxy server and proxy server port, and those would previously would use a COM-IBM kind of prefix for configuring those. Now they use an org eclipse microprofile prefix, so that you could use the same proxy server running in one application server and then move to Open Liberty and not have to change your config. Another one is JSON-B context resolver support. That allows users to specify JSON-B config and have that be used automatically when deserializing or serializing to JSON in a message body reader. And finally, Jakarta EE8 dependencies. We've been using those since I think microprofile 1.2. But now that's kind of mandatory in the spec. You can't use EE7 dependencies anymore. So the new stuff that we're going to talk about, and I'll have live demos for each of these three, are query param styles. We use those for multi-valued HTTP query parameters. So there's different styles that different servers use, and so a client has to be able to accommodate those different styles, and it's basically just the way that query parameters are sent as part of the full HTTP request to the server. So now we have a way to change the style that those are sent, and you'll see that more in the live demo. Next one is automatically following redirect responses. So if a server responds back with a 300 level HTTP response code, that basically says that the data that you're looking for is somewhere else. And it usually comes back with a link to the new location. And so by default, microprofile REST client does not follow redirect responses. It'll just return that 300 response to the user, and then the user can then make a decision as to what they want to do with that. But new in MP REST Client 2.0 is the ability to automatically follow it. So if one comes back that's like a 307, which means kind of like temporarily redirected to a new URL, it'll just follow that automatically. And so the same request that was intended to go to location A will end up going to location B and getting the data, and the response that the user sees is just the response that they would have expected to receive from location A. And finally, server sent events. Those are something new in HTML5. They were added. The support was added to JAX-RS 2.1, which allows basically a server to send data asynchronously to one or more clients. And so it could be like a broadcast thing, like think of that as like a chat app. When one user sends a message that says hello, that message gets broadcast to all clients in the chat room. Or it could just be on an individual basis. You could say, hey, I'm interested in, let me know anytime somebody raises the bid on my auction site or something like that, and then you might get a response back. So that's what server sent events does, and now that capability is enabled in microprofile 2.0. So with that in mind, let's look at all three of these. So the first thing we're going to look at is query param style. So in this case, we're building up a query param client that looks like this, just a single method with a query parameter using list strings. We're going to pass in just A, B, and C. And we're going to do it 3 times using 3 different config options. Query param style multi-pairs, which is the default. Then we're going to use comma separated, and then we're going to use array pairs. We're just going to append all that data and see what actually gets sent across the wire. Just use curl down here and run this, and we see that multi-pairs looks like we'd expect. We see query equals A, and query equals B, and query equals C. And for comma separated, it's a lot cleaner in my opinion. Query equals ABC, separated by commas, and then the array pairs is kind of popular with PHP, and so it uses kind of this array square bracket approach. So the next thing we're going to look at is following redirects. So for this, basically the key thing here is we have a new config option here called follow redirects true when you're building your REST client, and when that's set to true, then redirects will automatically follow. So what we do here is we're going to see the request, and what comes back will show us basically the response. And what we see is, so when we do it the first time with the default, we should see just a 307 because we're accessing something that's old. And when we see the second one, it should show the actual response that we want to see. So our default client shows a return code of 307, and it has a location header saying it's at demo/new. When we set that parameter to true, then auto redirecting client gets 200 and it gets the actual entity. Just to be clear, we've got this response to string. This is not the entity that's coming back. This is actually a header that's coming back. So there is no entity for this 307 request. Last, let's look at server sent events, and that's going to go access this SSE endpoint, and all that's going to do is take a number of events and print them off kind of in alphabetic order. And so the way it works is we build up our REST client like we normally would, new builder, base URI build, but the client itself returns a publisher. So basically what makes it an SSE client is it produces a server sent events, and the return type is a type of publisher, or reactive strings publisher. The parameters are optional. In this case, I wanted to show different events so that we could see how many events, so we could see whether it's canceled, whether the publisher is essentially completed by the server because it's done sending requests, or by the client because the client may decide, hey, I've gotten enough from this server. So then the way it works is we create the client the way we always do, and then we run that get method, get events method, and then the publisher has a method called subscribe where it passes in a subscriber, and that subscriber basically implements these four methods: on subscribe, on next, on error, and on complete. And so we've implemented that, and that means that this will happen asynchronously. When it gets a new server sent event from the server, it's going to invoke this on next method and send the next string. And then we're going to wait for 45 seconds for it to terminate. So let's go ahead and run that now. And what I want to do to kind of show this sort of in real time is, I'm using port 9079, and then I've got this TCP tunnel set up that's going to listen on port 9079 and then forward to 9080. So this way we can kind of see the communication as it's happening in real time, because the initial request to the client is going to be pretty boring. So and in this case, we're sending in, we want 25 events, and we'll cancel after 30. So this means that the server should close the connection before the client. So go ahead and kick that off, and then we can watch over here in real time as it goes through the alphabet. And with 25, we'd expect it to we expect the client to read all the way up through Y, or that's at least what should be sent. So now we're done. We can come back to our client output, and we see that it received that the on subscribe method was invoked. It invoked the on next method 25 times, and then the connection was closed by the remote server. Now if we were to do that again, we could do that, and basically we could kind of reverse these two numbers. We'll just say cancel after 10, but we'll still send 25 events. Now what'll happen is the client will accept 10 requests and then it will close the connection. The server may still send an 11th an event. Because it's a timing issue and we can see over here that actually it did, yeah. So it sent an 11th event, but when we look at what the client received, it stopped after 10. So it canceled after receiving 10 events. So that's what server sent events looks like in the microprofile REST client.